everyone. Welcome to C3 Films. My name is Cheryl. This is.
Chris.
And today we are doing another episode of It Wasn't That Good about the live action Flash movie starring Ezra Miller. We are going to be talking spoilers. But I'm going to tell you right now, it's okay. Don't worry about it because we didn't like it anyway. And you probably don't want to watch it if you haven't watched it already. So here we go. Where to begin? Where to
Baby
begin?
baby shower.
Oh my god, that's what I wrote my notes too. So, I was like, this is only funny because I thought of it.
Right. And so I start with that because that's actually one of my favorite parts about the movie.
No, but it was so your
It's so
favorite
bad.
your favorite part because it was so bad it was laughable and therefore entertaining to you,
And
or
there yes, that's exactly why. That's exactly why. Uh so
gosh, what's with the CGI in this movie? It's like most of the time I don't really care that much about how good or bad CGI is, but this is so off-putting. It was like
yes.
the quality of CGI in this movie is worse than when CGI was first invented.
Yeah, no, it's pretty bad, and I mean, yeah, that's probably the best place that we can start. Is just that this is a movie that is about someone that runs faster than the speed of light, and you're going to have a lot of set pieces that involve that, and they just look terrible. Like the babies that we were talking about in the baby shower scene, like they looked very CGI and terrible. The way that the Speed Force itself was represented in the movie looks very terrible. And there are times where even Barry, like going and looking in different parts of the Speed Force, like how he is represented while running through the Speed Force, is also just very terrible. Like there's a lot in this movie that is wrong. But one of the most egregious things that people will notice, the first thing you'll notice when you watch this movie, before you even get into like the other stuff that is a little bit more about the story itself, is the fact that it is just not presented in a very good way, despite being a movie that has a very high budget.
Yeah, and I know I heard that what people are saying in the chat, that it was a stylistic choice to show that's just how it looks like in the Speed Force. But the problem with that is that it isn't stylized enough to make me think that they did that on purpose. It just looks bad. And there's a lot of things you could do intentionally to make it look stylized, and this is not one of them. Saturate it or something, or make it even more absurd so that it looks intentional, because all it looks like is a bad choice, a dumb
Yeah.
choice.
Yeah, I mean, it has to, if it's going to be a style, it has to be obvious that it's a style. And you still want it to be aesthetically pleasing in some way, otherwise, it's going to look like a mistake. And when people look at your aesthetic choice and think it's a mistake as a majority, then you made a bad choice. So, but let's go ahead and just, I guess, let's start at the beginning. The whole thing with this movie is that you have the Flash and he's working with the Justice League, or at least certain members of the Justice League that they wanted the actors to come back for these scenes. So primarily that's basically him working with Batman. And because Superman is somewhere else, Diana shows up for a brief cameo to smile and wave before she like jumps out of the movie. And like they're showing that Barry is kind of just like on cleanup duty. And even then, before all that, they make this whole thing. This is like, yeah, the first thing that popped in my head that was like a big issue. They make this big deal about him needing a certain amount of calories to function, and how he has this watch that measures like the calories that to get his body going and everything else like that. And it never pops up at all in the rest of the movie. Like he literally, the movie literally takes time out to point this out, to even show us this watch that he has measuring it, and then it literally is never even a thing for the rest. It's never a thing where it's like I can't access my abilities or something like that, or I'm too depleted in order to, or I'm running on low, and if I get to this low I won't be able to run at all. Like nothing like that happens. So it's a plot point that is literally introduced and not utilized. So right away, it's kind of like, I mean, and you won't know that until you get to the movie, but you think it's something that's going to be important and it's not. So when you come out of it, you're like, well, what is the point of even having that element as being a part of the film if you're not going to do anything with it? That's something that you could automatically, like, that's something that you cut when you're in the editing room. That's something that you cut because it doesn't add anything.
Yeah, and that's kind of how I feel about the cameo for Diana, Wonder Woman, and I guess Alfred, having Alfred and the Ben Affleck Batman. I guess the Ben Affleck Batman I get a little bit more, but what I didn't like is just how it was kind of sprinkled on at the beginning, and they're kind of treating Flash like he's a nobody, even like cleanup duty. Why? He doesn't need to be on cleanup duty. It has nothing to do. It doesn't contribute anything to the story. It may be like kind of a continuation of the previous Justice League movies because he's like new
Yeah.
to the superhero business, but um we also didn't need that. Like, it could have been like time has passed. He'd been doing this for a while. He's part of the team. Like, he knows, you know, Justice League members. Like, he's part of the Justice League. He's part of the team, but they're not really making him seem like he's part of the team. So when he goes to the past and changes the past and gets stuck and everything, and he's looking for his teammates, there's less of an impact of him wanting to find them and not be able to find them actually, because the only one
Yeah.
that really matters is Batman, and it's the wrong Batman anyway. So no
Right.
one that we meet at the beginning that has to do with Justice League really matters, and it just feels a lot like, why even bother with the rest of Justice League if you can't even use anyone that you need to use anyway for long enough? Like, we can't have Ben Affleck in the whole movie, or maybe they can, but they just decided not to because they wanted to do the Michael Keaton thing. But like, for example, in the CW version of Flashpoint, they didn't involve any Justice League members, and I was okay with that because they didn't mention it. But now that you
Yeah.
put Justice League in my mind, I'm thinking, oh, I'm gonna see more Justice League characters later, but you
Right.
don't. And
No.
so it just kind of leaves this like hole for me that like I want to be filled with Justice League members. Like, is this gonna be like Marvel where we get like the gang together in one movie, but it's all about Flash and the other guys are just kind of there to help them? But no, that's not what you get. Instead, you just get Flash twice, and one is even more annoying than the other one. So you have two annoying Flashes doing annoying
Well,
Flash things.
yes. Sorry. So there's so much I want to talk about. Like the stuff that you said, the stuff that he says. I'm gonna jump on something Playmat said real quick in the chat, where he's talking about an episode of Just League Unlimited where you have this character named Booster Gold, and it's the same thing where he's put on cleanup duty, and he doesn't want to be on cleanup duty because he thinks that he's something more. He thinks that he can do more, and what ends up happening is that this character ends up finding like a whole like different type of like side story that's happening and ends up saving like a few people, but because of what he does it actually ends up saving more people. But it's one of those things where he gets to learn something about the fact that even though he's not doing the thing that he thinks he should be doing, what he's doing actually matters. So once again, it's a way to tie in that feeling to the rest of his arc and the rest of that story that happens in like under 30 minutes. And so if you're going to have Barry doing this, because they're right in the chat, like Barry is like one of the best people to do this kind of job because he's so fast and he can get people out of a building that's falling like really quick. So like, yeah, he is good at that, but he's complaining about it. So if you want that to be an arc for that character, well, then you have to get to a point where he realizes something about how what he's doing actually matters, even if it's not the glamorous thing that he would rather be doing. And they could have even had tied that back to the whole point where there's a point in that movie where he talks about the first day he got his powers was the day that Zod showed up, or the day after he got his powers was the day that Zod showed up, and he ended up having to try to save this boy and his father. But the father died, but he still was able to save that kid. That's the lesson right there, right? Like, even if you're only able to save one person, you're still saving somebody. And so having an appreciation for that would be great. But guess what happens in the movie? He never goes back and finds that kid in that father, or he never does anything like that, because the entire last part of the movie takes place in a desert where there are only soldiers fighting like against Kryptonians, and we're not saving it really any of those soldiers. So even that moment that he talks about being so defining for him is not something that's revisited in the film at all. So the film has all of these plot points and these beats that they kind of mention, or they're like hinting at, and then they just go nowhere. And that's like, I think, one of the most frustrating thing about this movie.
Yeah, it's like you have all this setup with no follow through. Like, why even talk about him being a cleanup duty guy when he doesn't grow from it? There's nothing that
Mm-hmm.
comes from it. Like, he doesn't go on this like mission to try to be more than a cleanup duty guy. No, instead he just does something else, and he tries to go back and save his mom. And there's nothing in the beginning that leads you to him doing that except for the trial for his dad.
Mm-hmm.
So why even
Right.
have all that stuff in the beginning if not just, to, to show us things that they think they want us that we want to see but we don't want to see, or we would love to see, yeah, if you were going to actually use it more than just be like, hey, I'm just going to put in insert thing that is cool, insert action scene with Batman, the Batman that you know that we already introduced you to, and here's Wonder Woman, wave and smile, like you said, lasso of truth joke. Okay, great. The joke was stupid, by the way. Like, that's not how the lasso works. Um,
I was very upset. I was happy to see Ben Affleck, and because I actually am one of those people that enjoy Ben Affleck as Batman, so I want to see him as Batman more. I think he could be a really good older Batman, but yeah, he's barely in the movie because it's Flashpoint, and they decided to focus more on Michael Keaton, and I mean, it's fine, I guess, but yeah, it's a little too bad that they basically turned the Justice League into kind of a joke.
exactly.
Even Aquaman at the end of the movie is just walking around drunk and about to like drown in a puddle because he's so like drunk for whatever reason. So like the Justice League members in this film are like just treated for a
Trash.
laugh.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like what Marvel did to Thor. But anyways, um,
Oh shit.
but getting into it, I mean, I do want to give a little credit because I do think they did a couple things right. I
Sure.
know in CW they did make Iris a brown woman, which I liked. And in this movie, this live action movie, they did the same thing. And they also made his mom Latin. So
Right.
I also liked that because it's something that I wasn't expecting. And I just like that it just felt like they were trying a little bit, just a hair, to make this a little bit more diverse, like A for
Mm-hmm.
effort. But I mean, you could have done a little more for sure, but that's okay. Whatever. I don't even care anymore because this movie is like a total fail for me anyways, so I'm not even gonna cry so much about it. Because then I'd be even more upset. Like, the one time they have people of color and the movie sucks. No, the movie sucks with or without people of color in it. So.
Yes, and that gets us into talking about the berries, because Barry Allen was already kind of annoying the way he was portrayed in like the Justice League Joss Whedon cut of the film, and how we even see him being betrayed. He just seemed like he was a very annoying character. And then in this movie, for whatever reason, they decided that they needed not one Barry but two Barry. It was very much and that character ended up being one of the most annoying characters that I've ever seen in anything that I've watched. And it didn't even and it was like, are they really trying to make it funny? Are they trying to play the like this type of person like just to be funny? And it wasn't funny. It was legitimately annoying. And I think story wise, yeah, okay, fair enough. But very story wise, like they absolutely did not do a good job of making this character endearing. They absolutely made him someone that was grating. And yeah, in the story, they're trying to make it so that regular Barry is also annoyed by himself. But then just some of the things that end up happening, and they're supposed to be funny when he's like running around in the suit and running around naked and all this other stuff. And it just comes across like, dude, what am I watching? Like, how is this interesting? How is this fun? And that just made it like so absolutely that, I mean, that was one of the biggest reasons why it just was so challenging for me to get through this movie.
It was almost like they were trying to give him an origin story at the same time of doing the most famous Flash story that they could. So like crossing those things to two things together so that we could watch him kind of learn how to be the Flash. But it's like it's too much. Like I feel like they were trying to do too many things in this movie, and they were trying to like throw in all these elements that they think that we would like to see, which we would, but they don't tie together. And I think that's the hugest issue with this is that like the like almost like the only thing that they did right in the movie was having him have that growth with learning to let his mother go and having the moment where he could say goodbye to her and like basically having a moment with her to say goodbye, which they did that in the CW show. They didn't do that in the Flashpoint animation, but which is what I missed from that. So it is like a huge thing, and it is an important thing that I think a lot of people really connect to, but the execution for the rest of it was just so, not good that it's hard to like the movie with having that only one good thing in there.
Yeah,
Um,
and but at the same time, like that is I agree. That is like the best thing about the movie. It's one of the best messages. But like they just mentioned in the chat as well, it's immediately undercut when he just he just moved he put something back because of the fact that he just did something as simple as moving a can. And because he moved the can, then it meant that the entire world changed. And yet the message and everything that he went through, because yeah, the other thing is that the other Barry, the younger Barry, gets endearing when he's like, we have to keep saving everybody, nobody dies. Like that's when he feels the most relatable, like I want to save everybody. And then he can't, and it's like we gotta let this go. So he has this moment where it's like I have to let my mom go. And yet in the same scene he then goes and moves another can so that his dad can be saved. So the message and the power is immediately undercut like 5 seconds after the scene ends. And that's like one of the biggest things. They did something good and then they immediately undid it. And so it's kind of like, guys, so the character didn't learn anything. He learned absolutely nothing if that is if he still ended up doing this. And yeah, you had it work out for him this time because the story wanted it to work out for him. But for all intents and purposes, it shouldn't have worked out for him based off of what happened in the movie.
yeah, and the other thing is, I don't think well, I don't know because I've never, had a finish for the Flash, so I don't think his dad ever gets out of prison. He's never been proved innocent in any of the other versions that I've seen. So having that happen in this version seems kind of weird. Like it deviates from what is known in the comics. So now they're just kind of doing whatever they want to do. Unless I'm wrong, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think Barry's dad ever gets proven innocent. Um, okay. Strika says in season 2 he gets out. Doesn't he go back? It's been a while, but it seemed weird to me. I don't think that it happened that way though, where he went back in time to fix it, because that's, you know, the whole thing about Flashpoint is that he got like a huge realization of changing the past is a no-no. But like you said, he does it in this movie to help his dad, instead of
Yeah.
his mom. But yeah, the one thing that I did wish that they did in the movie is actually have like a person that that you can't really recognize in the background, when he goes to the grocery store the first time, so that we could see like, oh, he was there, like he was watching
Oh yeah.
himself do it, and so that was part of it. But I rewound it and I looked and there was no one in the back, so that kind of bummed me out that they didn't put that there. um
People don't know how to do time travel.
yeah, I know. And you know me, I hate time travel, but um in movies, so you know, I don't know, it's
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, well, I guess the other option is I'm not. We're going to get into it, but like, if he was always there and then he put the can back, then that meant that everything that happened wouldn't have happened at all, because then it couldn't have happened because he put the
Right.
can back. So maybe that's why they did it that way. But it's time travel. It's annoying.
Yeah,
But
it gets messy.
like, yeah. But let's talk about a little about some of the other elements that happen in this movie. So the the Arbery from our timeline ends up losing his powers because he's convinced that he has to get the other Barry to get his powers. Like, and I don't know why he thinks that when he is existing in the same universe as himself, which also doesn't really make sense. But he feels like he has to get this Barry his powers for reasons, even though this Barry doesn't necessarily need to have powers. But he thinks in some way if this Barry doesn't get his powers, then he won't get his powers. So that's just how they do it. But through him doing that, he loses his powers. So and that's how they tried it. So like this story has elements that cross over from the story that we know from the animated and the comic books. And so in the comics slash in the animated one, he loses his powers because he changed the past and therefore he never got his powers. But in this one, he still has his powers. He loses his powers because he's trying to get himself his powers, and then that's why he loses his powers. And then now we go through this thing where we have this other Barry trying to learn how to be the Flash, and them doing basically like you said, they're giving him this origin story, and they get to the point where the problem that's going to happen, which is Zod, shows up. And then they decide we need to find the other members of the Justice League. They don't know where any of them are, so they go only for Batman because Batman is the one that is still exists or whatnot, and that's well how we bring Michael Keaton into this film. So, talking about that a little bit, how did you feel about having Michael Keaton be back in this movie as Batman?
I thought it was fine. Be it, I did see this before I watched the animation, and so I was kind of bummed that they didn't do what they did in the animation, which is having Thomas Wayne end up being Batman, instead of
Mm-hmm.
Bruce, and then having that moment at the end where he gets to write a letter to Bruce. So I wish they stuck to that, because that's actually a really great, you know, reward, for an ending, and I think that would have been a great combination to have, for this story. Um, but I didn't really mind Michael Keaton. What I did mind was, that when they're in the Speed Force, we don't see any Batmans. Instead, we for some reason see, I guess we did see some Batmans, but most of them were different
Yeah.
versions of Superman, and we're like, why do we have all these different Supermans when Superman isn't even in this movie? They just talk about him, and now we're seeing all these different versions of Superman in those like balls of different universes, and they're all like looking at him as if they can see him. So I'm like, what is even happening? Like, what is the point of this? It doesn't make any sense to me. And then on top of that, having all the different versions of Superman, all the other actors that played Superman, like Nick Cage and stuff like that.
Who didn't even play Superman, but had a chance to play Superman, so it was a
It was
reference.
just, it's so weird. Like, I just don't understand, why they had any of that. And then, yeah, and then Christopher Reeves, that was also weird. And then having at the end when he goes back to his present time,
Hmm.
Ben Affleck is now replaced with George Clooney, and I'm like, oh, okay, great. Like, it meant nothing to me. I wasn't excited. I wasn't like happy to see the George Clooney version of Bruce Wayne, even though he's my favorite Batman, anyways. Because
Hmm.
we got all this other stuff. So, like, the appearance of George Clooney really gets watered down by all these other characters, these other cameos. It
It's
just,
also played for a joke. That's the only reason it exists.
yeah,
It
it's
it doesn't
just
exist as a consequence. It exists as a joke.
exactly. So, like, I mean, obviously, this can't continue. We're not going to have George Clooney come back to replace Ben Affleck. That's probably not, like, so it just
Mm-mm.
kind of really messes with everything. I'm sure they're not going to make any more of this Justice League group. This is like just over because they literally messed up every single film for this DC universe. It's just so disappointing because DC is so great, but it
Yeah, I know you
just
love DC.
it
So,
just bugs me
yeah,
so much.
yeah. I mean, and it's unfortunate. But the other thing that was special or that was important about this movie was the fact that this was a movie that debuted the live action or the film live action version of Supergirl. So we had in this movie instead of Superman, we had that Kara Zor-El crash landed in his place and was captured by the government, and she's the one that's been held hostage this entire time. And so when they're going to go rescue who they think is Superman, it ends up being her. And I actually think that that's a pretty cool thing. And they have a really cool fight sequence where you have a 70-year-old Batman that is going and moving around like he's 20, but it's fine. It is what it is. It added for a really cool sequence of seeing Batman take out all of these like soldiers. So when they take her out and she gets her sunlight, then she starts to be able to like have her powers back and fly and stuff like that. And I I like the actress. I think that she has the look for Supergirl. I don't think they gave her much to do in this movie. And to be fair, I guess you could say that even in the animated version of this, Superman didn't have much to do, but that movie was juggling like seven characters. This movie is juggling four, I guess, if we're saying two Barrys and Batman and now her. And she has this moment when she goes to go and like I guess find out what Zod is doing or to like fly and see Zod. And she literally goes, flies, and gets within Zod's view. And just so you guys know, in the story, Zod is looking for her. She has the thing that he needs in order to like remake Krypton. And so he's looking for her. And she shows up to where he is. He looks up and he sees her. It's not like he does not notice her. He actively sees the person he's looking for, the only reason he's here, and he does not go after her. And it makes no sense. It makes absolutely no sense. The next time we see her, she comes to help Barry get his powers. We don't. I mean, how does she know what they're doing? Like she wasn't there for the conversation. She has no way of knowing that this is the thing that they're trying to do. But she shows up and then takes him to the lightning so that he can get his powers. Fine, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But there's like the the that's one of the like, biggest issues with this movie is just the logic behind it. The logic behind the movie does not work. And it is one of those things where it's just like, yeah, if you don't think about it too hard, then maybe it gets away with it. But if you think about it even a little bit, it's like, what are they doing?
Logic does not exist, and like, it's so stupid because, I mean, why wouldn't she be able to like? I know they like make her lose every time against Zod, but also like why? They're all Kryptonians. They should be like equal in strength and stuff, even though she's been like weakened, but they don't show her being weakened. They show her being strengthened from the sun. And in the what do you call it? The animated version, we have like a skinny Superman. So then it makes sense why he would have a hard time being able to, put up a fight against everyone else, even though he's like the strongest being on the planet and stuff like that. And so I think by not doing that, they just,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I like the effort that they put Kara in instead of, another man into this film, because it's a little bit, light on the female characters. So it made sense to me, and also I didn't see the animation yet. So it made sense to me to have
Mm-hmm.
Kara, but I know Playmat mentioned that it sucks because she's a woman and she always loses. She can't win a fight. She's a very weak woman in that sense. So it's
Yeah.
disappointing in that sense, but also because normal ass humans like Flash and Batman are taking out the other Kryptonians who, again, like I said, they're all equal. It's like 1,000 Supermans, and they're able to like take some of them out. And I'm like, they shouldn't be able to take any of them out. Really, it should all be Superwoman or Supergirl taking them all out. And I can imagine that, like, if she's the only one that could really do anything, then it would make sense to me that she would die every time because they can't help her.
Yeah. So here's the thing. First off, Zod shouldn't have been in. Zod should not have been the villain in this movie. I get it. They were trying to tie it back to Man of Steel, but Zod has no ties to the Flash. He actually never even knows Barry's name in this movie. He never talks to Barry in this movie. So that is not a Flash villain. And I get it. At the end, we find out that the thing that he saw in the Speed Force was himself, but and then you have this final conflict that is like kind of like the reveal or whatever. But Zod being the primary threat is not great. Zod doesn't do anything in this movie. He's kind of just there. And the truth is, if you remember Man of Steel, the fact of the matter is that those Kryptonians were not as strong as Superman because of the fact that they had not adapted to the sun of that world. The reason they're wearing those suits is because of the fact that they're afraid of the atmosphere. It is only after being exposed to the atmosphere and then slowly adjusting that Zod's able to like fly and all this other stuff and fight on the same scale as Superman. I can say that Kara's been has been locked away for all her life, so maybe that was the equal footing that they were trying to create for the two of them, where Zod's been fighting all his life but doesn't have the powers of Supergirl. Supergirl's been like imprisoned all her life, but now has a little bit of power because she saw the sun. But at the end of the day, she didn't do anything. She didn't do much, and it just was really unfortunate because it just kind of felt like these things are just happening and we're just throwing these things in there, but the connection and the emotional stakes that are a part of it just really aren't there. Like when she finds out that Clark was killed and her whole thing was she was supposed to protect Clark. That feels like that's supposed to be like a really big moment, and she does get angry, but then it just doesn't. I don't know. It's like there's just something missing. There's something missing there, and you could say it's like, well, the movie I guess didn't have enough time to like kind of explore that kind of element, but it's just really disappointing at the end of the day. It just doesn't feel good, in my opinion.
Yeah, and there's also just like there was just no character development for her at all, because she just kind of seemed to instantly know how to use her powers. And there's no
Mm-hmm.
explanation if like she had already been there and like knew that she had powers on this planet, um, and then like learned how to use it, because didn't Clark take a little bit to learn how to use his powers and everything? Like he didn't just like, oh, I'm Superman, right? He had to grow up and learn how to be Superman. Um, yeah, so,
Yeah, you just read
yeah.
the comment.
I just read the
Yeah.
comment. Yeah. Um, but yeah, so it's just there was just none of that in the movie, and I think that maybe if they had put that in the movie where she was just kind of trying to understand how her powers work and stuff like that, that she would therefore that have an even harder time fighting against Zod. So it's another missed opportunity for them to have put into the movie to explain why she can't beat them. And also I think that they should have made Zod more of, you know, an end of the world kind of situation, which I think they kind of fell short on, because in the animation, there was an ongoing war between the Atlanteans and the Amazons. And so that was a consequence that was set up immediately, whereas this took some time to get into. There was no it was almost like there's no stakes. All we can know is to go by if you had seen Man of Steel, and if you knew who Zod was and stuff like that, that, you know, like, oh, this means it's the end of the world. He wasn't doing anything that felt like it was the end of the world, because he wasn't destroying anything
Well,
really. We
yeah,
didn't get to
because they
see
were
very.
so
Yeah.
yeah, because they were so worried about the destruction of Man of Steel that they didn't want to do it again. So they put Zod in a bunch of shoulders in a daggone desert.
Yeah.
So where there are no civilians, I mean, sure there are soldiers, but there are no civilians. There's no people to save, and so the stakes actually feel very
Low.
low. It feels very low at the end of the day.
Yeah, and so the impact of younger Barry trying over and over again to try to save Kara was kind of meaningless, because he's only trying to save one person. And
Hmm.
why would he try so hard to save one person where he can't, like, he gets tunnel vision and he can't focus on the bigger picture of everything else? And, like, why does he care so much about her, where, like, before he was so willy-nilly about everything? Like, it seemed like he wasn't adult enough to care about anything, and all of a sudden he cares about the stranger who keeps dying.
Yeah, because she's pretty.
Yeah, but anyways, there's just so many things that were missed. Like, this, just a lot of it just didn't make sense, and it just felt like a complete waste of time watching this movie. There's just so many things that they did wrong. They missed a lot of things, and it was just a lot of action sequences that had no consequence, no meaning, no purpose, besides just being there to be like, oh, hey, we had Kara, we had Supergirl, we had Wonder Woman, we had Ben Affleck, and we had Michael Keaton and George Clooney. Ta-da! We
Hmm.
made a movie.
We made a movie. And yeah, it's really unfortunate, because this is absolutely the worst version of this story, and it's so interesting how the movie tried to get one over on people, where they had these actors and some people coming out and saying, "Oh, it's the best superhero film ever," because they were really trying to get people to go and see this movie, because it's almost like they knew that they had a bomb in their hands, but were trying to like mitigate the damage as much as possible. They had the whole stuff with what Ezra Miller was doing off screen, and they wanted to try. It almost was like they were trying to make it into a Batman movie, but there's only so much they could do. At the end of the day, the movie just wasn't very good. It really wasn't. Like, our title of this sequence aside, it just really wasn't that good of a movie. So I'm sure there's more that we could say, but we've already been talking for almost 40 minutes on this film. There's a lot more that we could talk about. If you guys want to hear us talk about more of this stuff, you can check us on our Twitch channel, twitch.tv/C3Films. It'd be great to see you guys over there. But what did you guys think about The Flash? Did you enjoy the movie? Did you enjoy this movie more than the other versions of the story? Do you think we're being too hard on it, or is this like, yeah, is this your favorite version? Whatever you thought about this movie, comment below, let us know, and when you're down there, give us a like, share, and subscribe. Even if you don't, though, I have been Chris, and this has been
Cheryl, and I wish I can go back in time and undo this movie.